You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Chris Blasinsky with NACS, and I'm joined by my colleague, Chris Rapanick, also with NACS, who works in our research department. Hey, Chris.
Hi there.
So Chris is known as Numbers Chris around here, and I'm Chris as Words Chris. So that's how we differentiate ourselves here. But the staff has also gotten used to calling me Chrissy. So we also differentiate that way. So if you hear that name and he throws it out, it's not it's not our imaginary friend hanging out on the podcast today. But Chris and I,
True.
You and I have been working together for quite some time, almost 2 decades here. And, we work pretty close together when it comes to our NACS Research capabilities. And you are the brains behind a lot of what goes on with our CSX database and bringing to life the numbers and the trends and all that great stuff that our members see either in our NACS State of the Industry report or at the NACS State of the Industry Summit. So that said, we are heading into the second half of 2022. And the first half of 2022, we had our State of the Industry Summit in Chicago in April, and we revealed our industry numbers. And things looked pretty good, right? We were looking at 2021 data. Now, the fun, because here we are midway through 2022, and a lot of, let's just say, hell broke loose towards that second half of the year last year. And, just what are you seeing? Let's just throw it out there. What are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a really good sample up through the first half of 22. Obviously there are some things that have been on people's minds. Probably fuel price would be the number one. Probably the second for retailers are probably direct operating expenses again this year. Definitely seeing continued growth there, especially as folks are probably aware when fuel prices increase, card fees kind of go through the roof, and we're definitely experiencing that. Some other things, repairs and maintenance and utilities are kind of following that as well. Other things, the labor issues continue for retailers. Turnover is extremely high. We have begun to see, especially towards the latter half of the first half of the year, we started seeing transaction counts on the inside decline. When we got into that whole $5 gas area in May and June, folks stopped going into the stores for sure. So we're seeing declines of 2 or 3% versus 2021 and closer to 7% versus 2019, which we've been kind of using as a benchmark. So a similar story, a different year. There are a few good things that we've seen. Baskets are still holding pretty steady. So there is an increase in total for inside sales. Some of it we think is certainly driven by inflation, but baskets are holding steady. Fuel margins are actually really good this year. So there's an improvement over 21, which most people probably didn't expect to see. And as an overall statement, I believe that we'll carry through the year as pretty profitable again and probably have some improvement in profitability for the year, assuming that things stay basically as they are now. So not so great news, but some things that aren't so bad as well.
So Chris, go back to fuels for a second, because you've been saying now for a little bit that you don't think fuel volumes will kind of get back to that pre-COVID level. I imagine that's probably going to hold true for this year as well.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different things that we can look at. We, as a rule, we use our CSX database for, our main benchmarking purposes. And actually, through the first half of the year, our CSX participants are flat. Amazing, or pretty close to flat, and that's pretty amazing in terms of fuel volumes. We also use some data from one of our partners, Opus, and they're showing about 2.5% down in volumes for the same time frame. So their sample's a little bit larger than ours and does include some of the smaller guys that may not be doing as well. But overall, yes, I would say that probably we'll never see 19 volumes again. And that kind of carries over into a lot of other things. I believe that that 19, although we use that as a good benchmark at the SOI Summit this year, I believe that 19, that we probably as an industry should probably let that go and start again at 21 and kind of use that to build on going forward. But fuel volumes as a whole, no, not quite there. And I would imagine that we've probably seen the highest fuel volumes that we'll ever see in the United States already.
Yeah. You mentioned direct store operating expenses. Those have been, a little out of control. I don't want to overstate that control piece, but we look at that and
I'd say out of control is a pretty good statement.
Fine. I was trying to soften the blow a little bit, but they've I'm trying to remember how many years when we first started seeing it kind of outpace the profits, and it's been like 5-6 years at least, not maybe more.
Probably out of the last 5 or 6 since I've been managing the SY Enterprise, it's probably been 5 of the last 7.
Right.
I would venture to say so. And there have been a couple of odd things. As food service has kind of developed, gross profits have been really good from food service, and so that's kind of offset it here and there. But as a general statement, direct operating expenses, especially on the wages and benefits side, have been ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, we're in 22, we're in a double-digit increase kind of environment where, I think it's 14% up over 21, which was, 20% up over 20, which was, flat to 2019, even though the business wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So, it's, especially the wages and benefits piece is kind of crazy. And, 21 and 22 has also seen utilities, and, a piece of that's probably fuel prices, and then repairs and maintenance. A piece of that is probably construction costs. All of those things have been super crazy as far as increases go. And then we get that special present this year. As fuel prices have increased, we get the special present of card fees being up 23% or so over last year. And they were probably 15 or 20% over 2020 already.
Oh yeah, I think they were higher, weren't they? Weren't card fees last year? I thought were for 2021 might have been close to 25% over 2020.
Yeah, so card fees kind of came back with price, in the last half of the year, but 2020 fuel was so cheap. Right. And there were very few transactions, so it's hard to kind of match against 2020. But certainly there have been 2 just nasty years for card fees for retailers, especially.
And especially when gas prices hit $5 a gallon.
Yeah. Honestly, it's hard to see, a future for 2022 and probably early next year that doesn't have some version of $4 plus gas. Mm-hmm. So you would like to think that card fees, may decline some, but I would venture to say that's probably not the case. There doesn't seem to be any kind of sunshine on the horizon as far as it comes to supply on fuel. And I think probably in most of our lifetimes anyway, this is the actual first time that there's been a true to life long-term supply issue for fuel. There's been, here and there nickel and dime type things that lasted a year or maybe a year and a half, but never something that it's kind of hard to see the end of. And that's probably where we're at now with, the situation with the Ukraine and Russia, especially.
Right. I mean, it's, oil's traded on the global market, and we are not isolated alone here in the United States from what happens on that market.
And I don't want to get overly political, but our current administration's policies probably aren't going to change just based on the fact that once you get rolling in one direction, it's hard to change that direction. Yeah. And even though everyone, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, we're all sharing that pain of fuel prices. It's hard to turn that ship around. Right. So theoretically, you got a few more years of a Democrat in office. It's probably not going to change their policies. that doubles up the situation where domestic production probably won't come into play. And to be honest with you, we're probably not a super great friend of, other OPEC producing countries. So it's tough to see the end of high gas prices as it looks right now.
And our industry, we sell about 80% of the fuel or the gasoline that's purchased in the country, right? So it's always, how do you get someone inside the store for the higher margin because the higher margin items like the food service and, the snacks and the beverages and things like that. But when it's $5
Absolutely,
gas, it's just, and we're not in $5 gas right now, at this
We're not.
at this
We're not. I
recording,
think
we
this
are
is.
not there, but we did hit it. And that's part of
Yeah.
the
I think we've also experienced the largest drop in terms of cents per gallon in the shortest period of time. So that's also good news, and that's why I would like to say that I hope that maybe we settle in around $4 for the rest of the year. I think that would be great news. So hopefully that's the case. I am not a futures or commodity
nor
trader.
should we
I'm
be
just saying that would be
nor
nice.
should we be
Yes,
in the
nice.
association called NACS.
Absolutely. So I would also like to say that, transactions are still out there. And, maybe as people begin to see that, that things are dropping, I think people tend to probably say, wow, gas prices are dropping. Maybe this is all over, and maybe they will, go back inside because, transactions at the pump are up like 24% right now. So people are going on site. They're buying fewer gallons and they're paying for them outside and not going inside. So there are people there. There are shoppers at the stores. They're just not going inside right now. So hopefully this will be more, a positive, result will happen from this, from people thinking that maybe, okay, this whole thing is kind of over.
Sure.
That would be the hope.
We are in the summer drive season, right? We're in summer drive. People are out there taking vacations, and just I pop on social media here and there, and it doesn't look like people are staying home. At least my friends.
Yep, absolutely. I would agree with that as well. And I'm honestly hoping that when we get July data, that maybe we're closer to flat on the inside transactions. Right now we're running about 2% down, which this is to 2021 again, not to years prior. I believe that's not terrible, for the huge increase in gas prices that we've seen. So if we're able to get back to flat, for July through the rest of the year to 21, I believe that would be pretty good news for the industry.
Yeah. So what are you seeing inside the stores? Anything popping out that looks kind of cool or kind of problematic?
I would say that honestly, food service, I believe, is kind of back to normal. Some
Since
areas post COVID took longer to come back than others. Dispensed beverages especially took longer than prepared food. I believe, and this is kind of what I tell folks, hopefully people can believe this as well, that, you never knew who used the dispenser before you, but you kind of knew, the fact that your sandwich was made while you sat there and watched it, and people were more likely to trust that. But I believe now that, folks have, their trust in dispensed beverages has kind of come back. So we're seeing that business come back. Both cold dispense and frozen dispense are up in sales. I do believe that they're probably being promoted a little bit more heavily than they have in the past, and that would go to cold dispense too. Margins are off on all the dispensed beverage categories, so that's kind of the downside. But food service in general, sales are way up. Margins aren't great, but gross profit dollars in general are good. It is outpacing what the CPI is in as far as inflation goes. So, it's up double digits, and folks are somewhere between 8 and 10% on the CPI is what most people say. So, at least it's beaten that. On the merchandise side, not as good. So merchandise is up about 5 or 6%, versus the CPI, then that probably would put us in the hole. But, we had some pretty good years, even during COVID, merchandise on the inside was really good. And, you kind of have to hit a bump at some point. But even still, inside sales and merchandise sales in general are still positive. But you have to obviously take into account that some of that is inflation driven. Baskets on the inside are still positive and growing a smidge, not as fast as they were. You kind of have to think, when you look at basket, as long as inside sales are positive and inside transactions decline, the basket's going to grow a little bit. So it's kind of a false flag, but it's better than everything being negative, I believe. So if inside sales are negative, then we definitely have a problem. So at least there is some, somewhat silver lining to the cloud. So I think, inside business, if we can get, the shopper inside, they're back to buying, cold dispensed beverages and coffee, when they want it. And merchandise is still strong. So I believe that, the challenge for everyone is, number one, finding someone to staff the store so they can serve the customer when they come in, and then getting folks to come back inside the store again, when they've become a little wary of that, knowing what they're going to spend at the pump.
Right. You and I are on the road a decent amount and talking to retailers a decent amount. This year when we have started filming for Ideas to Go, we've visited stores that are brand new, right? Like it doesn't seem like our folks are necessarily slowing down. You mentioned the, DSOE with the construction costs and everything. There's certainly a, and I think we've seen it for the past several years, larger companies are really going all out with these new concepts, new next gen store models and everything. And I don't see that slowing down even in, it's remarkable to me that even in this type of, climate that the growth is still pretty impressive.
Yeah. I think that and obviously NACS tends to gravitate towards the top performers in the industry. Mm-hmm. And those guys that we generally visit on the Ideas to Go are definitely, usually food forward. Yeah. And I believe that, the ones that you visited recently honestly think and have, think that they can compete with any QSR out there. And I believe that's the attitude that you have to have. And I believe that they're successful at it. And, to be honest with you, with, nothing against any of the NACS membership, but, when you have the resources that some of these larger companies that have experienced success in the food side that they have, versus a guy that, maybe has one or two stores that doesn't have necessarily the resources, it's a whole nother ballgame. And I believe now that, certainly when times are tough and, it's not always easy to come by, profit especially, I believe that those are the ones that are going to rise to the top. Just like we've always said, the top quartile will do. NACS has been preaching this for certainly since I've been around is if you don't understand that fuel is going to go away and those margins that you earn on fuel are not forever, then you're going to, lose. These are the guys that listen to that message, and they're the ones that have been engaged with NACS and the ones that have been pushing the food programs, and they're the ones that are reaping the benefits now, even though times are super tough. Yeah. And, I believe that's the whole story there is that, these guys believe they can go out and they can compete with a QSR day in and day out. And they're showing that they can.
I mean, everybody's got to eat, right?
That's correct.
And I think people, correct. Maybe one of the things that came out of the pandemic is people who, obviously we've always served the customer as quickly as we possibly can, Absolutely. And out in under 4 minutes. But, during the pandemic, they've grown accustomed to come inside of our stores and find this great quality food, like you said, that can compete with anyone out there, and then pick up other stuff too.
For sure.
And food, as we've been saying for quite some time, I mean, food is a lot of people will probably agree that food is the future of this industry.
For sure. And, I don't know how often you visit a QSR, but I live in a relatively small town and, we have the normal selection. And I'll tell you that, more often than not, these guys have a line wrapped, 3 or 4 times around the building now, or I've lost track of the number of times that a local coffee purveyor in my area has a sign on the door that says, hey, our inside's closed because we don't have staff or we don't have, or we didn't do or whatever. This has happened more frequently than I can count. And, I'm not necessarily a customer of this purveyor, but I go to pick things up for my wife or whatever. And it happens all the time. So I believe, that if in the situation that a lot of our convenience retailers, especially these guys that are food forward, are able to maintain their employee base and control turnover, that they're going to win based on that, because consumers are tough, and I believe they're even tougher than they used to be, and they don't want to stand in line, and they don't want to not be able to go inside when they want to. And I think that things are hard all over. And, when you see, a fast food place that's, paying $17 an hour to get someone to come to work and still struggling, then,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good story to tell for a convenience retailer that has a full staff, which I know a lot of them don't, but if they do, then that's definitely a story
Yep.
to tell. And I think that's the main differentiator amongst a lot of our members, especially, is that, these guys, they appear on the list of the top employers every year. That's something to say, I believe. Something to be proud of for sure.
Agree. One last thing before I let you go. Let's just say let's say I'm a retailer with 300 and something odd stores, and I call you up and I say, "Hey, Chris, how are things looking for the rest of the year?" What are you going to tell me?
Well, I would say I would imagine more of the same. So, the talk of the big R, the recession, is, floating around. And I believe that the odds are relatively good that that's going to be the situation. But, with that being said, I think that most retailers, especially if you've been able to make it to the level of 300 stores, that you're probably good at, controlling your costs. So that would be something that I would definitely suggest. With the price of things and inflation as it is now, we've been through recessions before without this, inflationary environment as bad as it is now anyway. So I think that it's going to be a little bit different. But if you're able to come through this and stay on top of your cost, management kind of processes, look at your menus, cut things that you can't really afford to make anymore because they're too expensive as far as what you can charge. Make sure that you're on top of your vendors, make sure that you're willing to do price changes when necessary as you get increases from your vendors, and do things like that with good controls. I believe that you'll probably make it through whatever recession happens. I also believe that if a recession does take place, that we can expect that 3.6%, unemployment to probably increase. And then that's the opportunity for, our members to go out and get good employees again. So I would view that as an opportunity to be on the lookout for folks that you can kind of beg, borrow, steal from other industries, or, maybe from other retail, channels, not necessarily convenience, but if you can grab them, then you should be ready to grab them. And I also think too that there's probably be some really good operators in like the B, C, or maybe even A range that are probably going to want to call it quits, as things continue to kind of get tough. And I think that there's going to be some opportunities to snatch up some of those guys for some players that have been, well disciplined and probably have some cash and, want to grow. So I think that all of those things are probably going to be a realization for folks that have been, well disciplined in the past. I also think that gas prices probably aren't going to go down.
Right.
I think that probably you can probably still maintain a good margin for the rest of the year. And probably when we're talking at the SOI Summit, come next April in Dallas for the first time, by the way.
Yeah, Dallas. We're not in Chicago anymore.
Yeah, no Chicago for the first time, at least since I've been here for 14 years anyway. But I believe when we're talking at the summit, we'll be talking about another good year, another profitable year for the industry. It will definitely be a tough year, but I think we'll be talking about another profitable year, and we'll be also talking about how to move forward. So, so I think that, at the end of, 22, that we'll probably still be, saying that we're super resilient and we know how to contract and expand when the time is right.
Yeah.
So overall, all good, I would say.
So, all right, let me flip it around for a second. What if I have 1 to 5 stores? Do I get the same commentary?
Well, so maybe a little different in that particular case. And I would say mainly that is because, of, the expense situation. because you can't get out of a labor or utility or high fuel price situation as a small operator. It doesn't change the fact that all of those things still exist. So the benefit, I believe, of being a small operator is being nimble, so you can make faster decisions, quicker, and that's kind of what's good about being a smaller operator. In this situation, in this environment, it doesn't really kind of solve your problems. So I would make the same suggestions to those guys. Tighten up where you can, and hopefully ride it out for as long as you can. And then, again, in some cases, it's always good to look for an opportunity to get out if you feel like the time is right. And, if you're a good operator, if you're someone who's been running, good stores and you've been profitable, then there are folks that are, obviously willing to talk to you about helping you exit the industry. And, sometimes that is the best choice to make.
Although we don't want them to do that.
Well, we would hate to see it.
We don't want to see anybody go. We want to see them grow.
And that's right. That's right. So it all depends on how well you've prepared your company to last through the tough times. And, when you think about going back, 2 SOI summits ago when COVID first started, and, we had this conversation with Chuck Maglet and Charlie McIlvaine. And basically the subject was, what do you do? Yeah. How do you make it through a time like this? Well, honestly, the times have been basically the same since that conversation took place. And to be honest with you, it's hard to see an end to it again because, the expectation, I believe, is that COVID's probably going to have another run up this fall. The fuel situation is kind of out of control. The labor situation is kind of out of control. It's a tough time. And, at some point, when you look at that whole, and you mentioned it, when DSOE outstrips, inside, gross profit growth, it's not a long-term situation. You can't do it unless you're just going to pull money out of your pocket for the rest of your life. And, you're independently wealthy and can fund a store. It's not possible to maintain. So that's something that you should always consider as a retailer, I believe.
Well, Chris, thanks for jumping on and giving us your insights and what the data is showing us. Like Chris said, we're going to be in Dallas next year for our NACS State of the Industry Summit, which is when we reveal all of our big numbers and trends and financial and operational performance for
Dallas
the industry.
For the SOI Summit?
The SOI Summit, and that is going to be April 18th to the 20th. On our website. A
little later in the year this year or next year, I guess.
A little later. Also, for those of you who are listening, the NACS State of the Industry Report of 2021 data is available for sale on our website, convenience.org/SOI report. And, tons of information and good actionable insights that all of our members can use. So, Chris, Thank you, Chris, for joining us, and we'll talk soon.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.